I thought it was just a stray cat, until I saw 3 claw marks, higher than a man's head, on Carter's barn door. Panther tracks, pressed halfway in, then vanished among the gravel. Inside, a coffee cup sat cold, with a stranger's lip mark. He rode hard into the canyon, where a chain and a skewed knot yanked loose one name of betrayal: Wade Dean. The barn door held the smell of damp, the wood grain swollen like gum around teeth. 3 parallel gashes, deep, straight, slicing through old varnish, stopped short at the crossbar, higher than a man's head. Carter laid his palm into the grooves, felt the wood fibers stand sharp as thorns. Not a knife. The strokes were thick, even, the rhythm steady. Something had stood up right to reach this high, or someone wanted him to think so. In the mud before the yard, the prints still held: heavy heel, round pad, 4 toes, tail dragging faint behind, shape of a panther. The track showed clear halfway from the fence to the yard, then disappeared abruptly among gravel. The stones were round, clean, as if turned by hand. Carter picked one up. A fresh scrape ran across its face, bright nickel. Steel shovel edge? Or a filed horseshoe? He dropped it. The clack of stone on stone was dry and brittle, like teeth striking. On the right fence post, a length of barbed wire was cut clean, the ends round and bright, not snapped by force. Someone had taken pliers, cut with one squeeze. Twisted around the old wire was a sliver of bird bone, thin, hollow, the color of frost-worn ivory, not a farmer's quick fix, a sign, or a message. Carter turned it over. On the bone's ridge was a flat, smooth patch, as if rubbed over stone 2 or 3 times to take off the snag. The barn door stood ajar, the bars fitted tight. Smell of warm manure, dark wood, the sweat of horses held from last night. From inside, a breath threaded with dry hay. No other sound. On the doorframe, a black hair was stuck to the varnish, longer than a cow's, stiff, its shaft oily. Carter rolled it between thumb and finger. No dirt clung. It was fresh. He put it in the left breast pocket beside a scratched brass lighter. At the bottom hinge, a narrow scratch ran straight across, like metal dragged, just enough to match the hinge's curve. Carter crouched level with it, eyes catching another detail. The top hinge nail had been replaced. The old head was rust brown, the new head was hard white, with fresh hammer marks, 2 cross dents. The nail was driven at an angle, buried across the grain to keep the wood from splitting, a trick done by someone who knew. This place path stopped where the tracks vanished. Between 2 stones lay a short piece of dark twine, no longer than a little finger, its ends knotted square, but off-center, the tails uneven, the knot's back pressed flat as if under a thumbnail. A casual hand would tie cross and loose. This off-tight style was Wade's. Carter rubbed the knot. Dry resin clung in his skin grooves like old candy. He pocketed the string with the hair. Wind shifted. The flies at the water trough broke apart, then reformed.
A calf called low twice, then stopped as if something had a hand on its throat. Carter craned over the fence. The herd was bunched in a corner, shoulder to shoulder, eyes wide, jaws moving but not swallowing. None stepped to the fresh-cut grass, as if they knew something in it he didn't. He counted quick by eye, 2 missing. The spotted left cheek, the white-legged one. Names he didn't have to say aloud. He shut the barn door for the sound, heard the hinge whine, iron on iron. In that whine was a part reminder someone had been here before him, and had thought it through. Carter went inside. The floorboards gave light under his boots. On the kitchen table, a cup of black coffee, the surface cold, oil sheen spread thin like snakeskin. Beside it, a spoon laid bowl up. He set them bowl down. The back showed a clean streak in the dust, sharper than the rest. Someone had stood here, spoon in hand, while he was out in the yard? Or himself, last night? He tried to recall. The memory broke where the lamp went out. The fans were cut off, the horse stamped once and went silent. On the wall hung the Winchester, barrel slanting down. He touched the barrel, the stock. Dust lay even except a faint, clean strip at the thumb rest, wiped not long ago, not to a shine. He eased it out, the safety silent. 1 round in the chamber, 5 in the tube. He dropped the magazine. Rounds stacked straight, brass noses quiet. He set the tube beside the cup. The coffee's cold smell grew heavier, made the gut tighten once. He opened the small window to the yard. The herd still huddled. 1 cow licked its lips, tongue striking teeth with a thin, paper-sanding sound. In the porch corner, Wade's old boots stood where they had, left toe split from last time on rock. A light dust lay on them. But on the right boot side, near the leather edge, was a thin, bright line where a finger might have dragged the dust away. Carter's eyes moved between the boots and the cup. He didn't touch the boots, only looked. Long. The old barn cat padded past him, stopped at the door, tested the air, its back fur lifting. It didn't call. It stepped light to the threshold, then slid back, curling under the chair. In this house, the smallest animal was the truest compass. Carter read what it said by motion alone. Out there,
Cowhide cartridge pouch, the oil tin, the rag. His hands worked without thought. Wipe, oil, cap, slip into the breast pocket. Each thing in the place it belonged. The habit dulled the ache at the temple. From under the long bench, he drew out the dagger with a round notch in the spine, his father's. The blade carried a hairline crack, no threat to its cut. He tested with a finger, felt the flaw like a hair snagged to skin. Still good. Silence stretched. No wind, no chickens. Only the wall clock's click, coughing like a machine wanting to spit a grain of sand caught in its throat. Carter set the cup down. The thud of base to wood sounded different, hollow, from an empty cup. He looked at his shadow on the floor, thin, slanted. The back had bent, some time without anyone telling him. He stepped to the door, set his hand on the brass knob, colder than it should be. Below it, the small wood latch he set when leaving was shifted 1/2 inch, as if someone had lifted and put it back wrong. Not the wind. Wind didn't put things mostly right. He slid a finger to the latch, pushed it into its groove. The sound of wood meeting wood was low. Sure, a breath in his chest eased part way. The rest clenched on the question, why put it back at all? Morning light slid crosswise over the ridge, like a dull blade dragged across skin. No cut, but a sting. Wet grass clung to his trouser legs, leaving dark streaks climbing upward like reverse fire. The mare in the stall pushed her head out, mane damp, eyes black. Carter ran his hand under the bridle strap, the smell of wet leather and sheep grease rising. He lifted the saddle from its hook, set it on her back. The saddle blanket heavy, its edge frayed like the border of an old map. Cinch strap pulled once, third hole, as always, locked. Leather squeaked light. Good. He slid cartridges into the tube, one by one. Click, click, click. Small, sharp metal sound. 5 rounds. Tube into the rifle. Safety on. Rifle in the scabbard. Dagger slid behind his belt, hilt to the right. Rope coiled at the saddle's side, its end tied in a flat knot. He looked at that knot a moment longer. Same kind as the twine knot he'd found in the yard. Square, but off-center. He bit the inside of his lip until the taste of iron came. Said nothing. On the path from porch to gate was a faint drag mark, long, like something heavy with a sharp edge had been pulled through wet grass. Not deep, just enough to slice the dew, so light caught along the cut and lit a mute white line. The mark led to the cut fence post. Stopped there, ended. Beside it, 2 flat stones pressed together, into a single face, as if set so a boot could step and leave it smooth. Carter bent to the grass's height. Between the stones was a short cow hair. Propped the fence with a rough stake, not for hope it would hold, but to see if anyone touched it while he was gone. He wedged a worn coin into the gap between door and frame, left it open just a slit. If pushed, the coin would fall, leave a mark. An old habit taught to a man who knew the first thing you lose is the moment you stop watching. He didn't call himself suspicious. He called it remembering. Before mounting, Carter looked back at the barn door. The 3 claw marks still there, breathing resin and old rain. He watched until the scent thinned, leaving only dry wind. From the corner of his eye, a small shift. The barn cat at the threshold looking at him, eyes round and black as beans. It didn't step out. He nodded once, like nodding to a child who could speak in silence. He mounted. The mare shook her head, bridle rings clinking. Her mane brushed the back of his hand, cool. Carter pressed his heels. She moved. The trail ran slantwise down the ridge, slope just enough to feel at the knees. In the thick grass, a band of mud lay like a sponge mark dragged sideways. He leaned low, fingers touching a pebble. Round, cold. A faint cross-scratch on its face, as if used to wedge something in a crack. He set it back. He didn't move another's unspoken evidence. Above, low clouds stretched in a line. No rain, just pale light. In his chest, an empty space opened and shut with each breath. He thought of the twine in his pocket and the off-center knot, thought of the boot with the chipped sole edge, thought of the window latch inside shifted half an inch, and how he didn't remember touching it. Each thing small as dirt under a fingernail. Touch it, seems nothing. Gathered, it weighs. The mare reached the fence edge. Carter stopped her. He turned to look back at the house. Low roof, dark window frame, coin still wedged in place. Good. In the yard's corner, the old door hook hung loose, bent slight, as if tested. His throat went dry. He swallowed, heard a faint snap like a knife cutting thread. He nudged the mare through the cut fence, followed the grass drag out toward the gulch, where the mud deepened and the wind would shift scent. The drag ended after the gravel stretch, straight to a hollow in the earth where a hoof had pressed deep, then lifted. On the hollow's edge, a spent match, black head, wood charred, the kind sold at the store in town, red and white box. Wade bought the cheaper green kind. This wasn't Wade's, or Wade had switched, or there was a third man standing here at the same into the land's skin. Someone had sewn it. Someone had pulled the thread. The seam left white, tight. He followed it. Wind pushed his coat out a moment, then let it fall. In his pocket, the black hair and the twisted knot rasped softly against each other, a sound small enough only the wearer could hear. That sound said one thing. What waited ahead had claws, had teeth, and had a hand. He didn't need more said. Men and predators alike out here knew how to leave a mark, and how to take it away when needed. He drew one breath, deep enough to keep a cool space in his chest before it warmed. The mare lengthened her stride. The earth dropped sudden, the rock gulch opening, cold air rolling from stone. Carter eased the reins, slowed her. Drifting behind was the house, the wedged coin, the old boots, the turned spoon. Ahead was clean gravel, marked mud, knotted twine. He took the right fork where grass leaned, the blades tracing thin letters. No one read those letters but men who knew the wind's hand. He read enough to know. Someone was leading, not just one. He didn't speak the name then. But when his tongue touched his teeth, he tasted the iron that had sat in his mouth since before first light. And he knew, if something tore today, it wouldn't just be back of a wooden door. The afternoon before, sun brushed the grass, gold until it felt hollow. Carter followed the trail to the last field at the gulch's edge. The smell of old blood mixed with damp soil still warm from the day. The red mark, wind faded to brown, stretched thin toward the slope's rim. At the edge it stopped clean, as if a large hand had wiped it dry. No carcass, no torn hair, no long drag mark. Only grass trampled into a circle, its edge folded over, like someone had worked a horse round this spot to soften it. He stood inside the circle, listening to the flies' thin, needle-like sound. The center was bare, the ground pressed flatter than the edges by half a finger's depth. On the right side, two flat stones lay together, their surfaces clean of mud, like a place for heels to stand a while and watch. Carter bent, ran 2 fingers over the grass edge. The blades were twisted against their grain. When cattle turn fast, grass lies flat. Here it was lightly corkscrewed. Rope? He lifted his head. On a low patch of heather, a polished arc shone, knee-high. Not horn polish. The mark of hide dragged over, again and again. Rawhide. At the circle's edge, a loose, rusted horseshoe lay. 4 nail holes, the rim eaten into fine saw teeth. Carter picked it up. The rust had a scorched tang. He turned it in his hand. The 2 nail holes on the left rim widened, as if pried loose in haste with a crowbar. Rust lay even, old. This piece hadn't dropped here today. It had been somewhere else a long time, and now was placed here. The circle, a boot print pressed in the mud, the heel chipped in a small half-moon. He didn't touch, just looked long enough. That chip matched one he'd seen before, in the house, on the boots at the porch. Left toe split, right heel chipped. Here it was, in the dirt. His throat caught for a beat. Wind pushed into his lungs, carrying a flat metallic tang like a blade's lick. He turned his head, followed the heel's track. It led into the circle, then vanished in the pressed ground. Carter knelt, put his ear near the soil. No cattle breath, only flies. He plucked a strand caught at the root of a clump. Not cow hair, not panther hair. Twine, dyed dark, flat-fibered. A knot at the end, square, off-center. Tails uneven. Back of the knot thumb-smoothed flat. A hand's habit. He touched his tongue to his teeth. The iron taste jumped. He dropped the strand into his pocket. In his chest, the heart took one off beat, then returned to its old pace, as if nothing had happened. He stood. Dust lifted from his boots, then settled at once. At the slope's edge, a small branch lay torn, the break clean as a knife, no fray. Nearby, the round dent of a post's end marked the dirt. Someone had set a stake to hold rope. He looked over the lip. The rock wall dropped straight, dry moss clinging. 2 fresh scratches running diagonal, a hand span apart. Something heavy had been dragged down, slid, then stopped somewhere below. But no carcass lay there. He lifted his head. The sky burned white. A thought stayed. It didn't hunt like an animal. It led. And someone waited. Carter scooped a handful of dirt. It didn't cling like mornings, dried quick. He crushed it to powder. Some blew away. The rest clung to his palm like chalk. He blew it off. It vanished. Blood wiped clean to nothing is a decision. That decision doesn't come from claws. The mailbox cast a short shadow on the path when 3 horses arrived. Road dust slid off Lockwood's open coat like fine rain. The coat's gap showed the black butt of a revolver. He didn't dismount at once, sat looking over the yard as if checking stock in another man's house. The two gunmen with him stopped alongside, spurs clicking, dry straw in their mouths. One wore a thick cartridge belt, brass lined tight. The other's hat brim showed an old sweat line. Lockwood flicked the reins. The horse stepped half a pace, stopped, chairs back, fingers tapping quick, then still. He read without needing the words. Saw the line, right of entry at any time deemed necessary, set in the middle, like a chicken bone hidden in stew. He slid the paper back toward Lockwood, said nothing, didn't meet his eye. One of the gunmen stepped forward half a pace, spurs touching with a small click. Carter heard that clearer than the ink smell. Lockwood smiled with his mouth, not his eyes. Just paper, he said, light as asking about weather. No one answered. The barn cat under the chair raised its head, blinked once, slid deeper. Lockwood pulled a pen from his pocket, scratched a gray line on the paper's face, set the pen on the edge, pushed it toward Carter. Carter didn't reach. He set his hand on the page, pulled it halfway closer, then let go. Lockwood watched the move, eyes narrowing by a fraction of a finger joint. The room's silence thickened. The wall clock clicked once, like someone flicking a nerve. Lockwood looked around, slow, chose the coffee cup on the table, lifted it, drank without asking. The rim held a stranger's lip mark. His tongue slid over it, like checking a piece of stock. Strong, he said, setting it down, square into the ring Carter had left that morning. A new ring overlapped the old, edges misaligned by half a grain of rice. He guided the mare over a run of flat stones, as if set to leave no trace. Each step the horseshoe struck stone with a dry, clean note, the rhythm as even as a man counting. At the low tree line, the canopy cut the light. The wind shifted tone, carrying the damp breath of stone and live moss from the cracks. The path narrowed to fit one horse. On the left, a supple trunk was polished smooth at waist height. On the right, another's bark had been shaved in a clean strip. Sap once beating there, now dried to a glassy vein that felt slick under the palm. The cut was straight, not splintered. Sharp knife, steady hand. Carter halted the mare, swung down. On the ground, a thin drag mark cut through dry leaves, shallow. Its end stopped at a propped stone. On that stone was a black smear like burnt resin. He scraped it with his knife tip. It stuck, smelled of old oil, chain oil. The animal out there had a chain, or what walked beside it did. He felt the blood inside his chest shift place. A crow passed overhead, its wings splitting the light in two. 3 flies hovered over a point, then scattered as if brushed by a hand. He searched. By the rock's base, a scrap of thin cowhide clung to a thorn. The cut was clean, square-cornered. Knife, not teeth. 3 steps away, a long black hair jutted from between stones. He pulled it free. Slick, thick-rooted, shaft oily, like the one in his pocket from the morning, but this one carried dried resin. He slipped it in with the other, felt the faint rasp as the two touched. Beneath a flat stone lay a worn boot print, heel chipped, the same chip. The track led deeper in. Carter straightened, back aching, eyes cutting through the trees. His throat caught. Not for the animal, for the man. He said it low, for himself. Here. No name. Somewhere ahead, water ticked like a needle touching glass. He stroked the mare's neck. Sweat dampened her hide. her ears tipped toward the dark cleft. He slipped the reins loose over a branch, shifted the dagger for easier reach. The Winchester stayed in its scabbard, safety still on, but he knew one finger could free it. He walked, weight on the edges of his boots so the leaves kept still. Short steps, shallow breaths. The canopy broke the sky into thin, bright strips. Sand underfoot changed color. Moisture rose sharp. The scent of raw meat thickened, then cut off as if someone had put on a lid. From ahead came a faint chink of metal on stone, like a chain link brushed over an edge. He stopped, leaned his back to the rock, listened. No voices, no cough, only insects. A held silence, tight as hide stretched on a drum frame, into the same pocket with the two hairs in the knotted twine. The pocket weighed more, as if carrying the things his mouth wouldn't say. The way closed in, rock walls near enough for a knee to scrape. He moved into shadow, eyes adjusted. On the left wall, at head height, two parallel scrapes gleamed white in the stone, spaced evenly. Not from an animal's leap, from blade testing or chain pulling, done many times. In the dirt, three round depressions lay a forearm apart, marks of a temporary wooden frame. A pen had stood here. He looked up. The sky was a thin, washed line. His breath slowed to the edge of his tongue. In his mind, the trampled grass circle, the rusted horseshoe set down light, the smell of chain oil, the clean-cut hide, the half-moon heel chip. Each took its place. They fitted into something he didn't want to name. The left of his chest pressed tight. The choke came and went, leaving a scratch down his throat. An insect winged past his ear, its buzz like paper tearing half through. Carter stopped at a bend before the gulch opened onto a bed of sand. He peered through a rock gap. There was a shape, not animal, a human shape, back turned, bent, dark shirt, waist tied with cloth. At the feet, a chain dragged on stone, clicking. Where it led, not yet clear. He didn't go forward. He let the shape stay where it was. He drew a silent breath, lips pressed, shoulders lowered half an inch. Behind him, the mare shifted, a hoof scraped stone with a flat sound. The figure raised its head. He didn't draw. He set his hand to the rock, let the cold sink in. A word passed his mouth without sound. Right on time. The scent of raw meat returned, now with a trace of old ash. In his head, the wall of details stood. He stepped half a pace, enough for the brim of his hat to touch light, and he knew one more step would pull the secret into open air. But he held back. Because secrets, best to let them come on their own. Here, what hunts sometimes wants to be seen first, just to say, you're one beat late. The white sand spread like a flat palm. Wind stilled. In the center, a woman stood straight-backed, narrow-shouldered, dark-shirted, left hand holding a chain that rasped over stone. At the chain's end was a black panther, long-bodied, muscle strung under skin like a drawn bow. On the third link clung a strip of calf hide, square-cut, the blood turned brown. It raised its head, fine whiskers trembling once, the metallic tang flicking through the air, and gone as if pinched off. Carter stopped in shadow's edge, hand resting on stone, cold in his bones. Repeat. Carter didn't answer at once. He watched what told the truth, the panther's forelegs planted, claws sheathed, pads clean, not committed to strike. Tail still, not lashing, only flicking slight, gauging distance. On its left flank, a fine scar ran in an arc, whiter than the fur, the curve of a rope once tightened. The chain linked to a leather collar, its back slick with oil from regular handling. The oil carried no scent from his ranch. It was the smell of someone who knew the stone country. The woman loosened the chain half an inch. The panther shifted its weight, dropped low, chin almost to the sand. It looked at Carter without blinking, then at his hands. He kept them empty. No tilt of the hat, no twitch toward the dagger hilt. In that silence, a fly landed on the strip of calf hide, rubbed its legs twice, and lifted off. The woman clicked her tongue once, a dry, pebble-on-pebble sound. The cat blinked once. The muscles in its neck sank further. No lunge, no growl. He stepped from shadow far enough for sunlight to catch his hat. Boots sank half an inch. The sand swallowed the sound, left a flat, neat print. He stopped 2 paces away, close enough to see the sweat line at her hairline, and the stub hilt of a small knife at her left hip. Leather sheath tied high in the way of people who work the stone country. Binding hole up, not sideways like roadmen. "My name's Lila," she said. No surname. She drew the chain to a new angle, eyes never leaving his. The panther rolled its shoulders, turned with her, no resistance. Its body took orders like a broke ranch horse. He swallowed once, throat making a dry sound. His right arm still hung loose, not tensed, but the bicep was tight enough to keep from shaking. The raw meat scent from the hide strip on the chain thinned, then vanished. At the sand's edge, 2 wood stakes crossed, bound with raw hide in an off-center square knot. Same knot he'd picked up from his own yard. The back thumb-smooth flat. She turned her head just enough for him to see the red-brown hair stuck to her collar by sweat. She didn't ask. She didn't explain. She let the chain and the animal speak for her. The cow killer sitting still, waiting, not choosing him for meat. The reversal sat there. What he'd hunted for, darker than the hide, driven, not dragged. Lila unhitched the gate loop. With thumb and forefinger, quick, without looking, same off-center knot. She pulled back a half-tarp over hay, the smell sharp. A water trough, board-built, stood against the wall, rim lined with resin to keep it tight. Everything here said one thing: not in haste, not in excess, not slaughter. Carter laid his hand on the rail. The grain was damp with animal sweat, not blood. His own breath came shorter. She didn't tell a story. She set down a leather bag, drew out a rope length with a clumsy braided end, not her hand's work. She showed him. The braid was overtight, the ridges stepped, the kind tied in a rush by a right-handed man whose index carried an old cut, making him skip it, the braid leaning. Carter had seen that lean for years on ropes in his own barn. She didn't speak the name. She let the rope lie in his hand. Finish and start in the same fiber. His chest sank as if someone had hung iron there. Lockwood missed a steer on the rim, she said in few words. I penned the herd here after dark. She nudged the trough closer, smoothed the tarp's corner. So they're alive to go back at dawn. The next line was straight. The herd's spot, Wade told me. Know your kin, no more. The name fell into the sand and didn't bounce. Carter stayed still, hand on the rail cooling. The sound around him stepped back. leaving only the thud of his heart in his ears like boots in a narrow alley. His throat caught, as if on the same off-center nut. He thought of the porch boots with the half-moon chip, the turned spoon, the latch shifted half an inch, the black hair in his pocket, the chain oil smell on the rock. Each loose piece pulled into a block. No picture, just weight. He didn't ask why. Here, why was for the one left breathing after. He looked at the calves. The white-legged one blinked, the light strip in its eye thin as a blade. Lila stood angled, her shadow cutting his chest. She reached as if to take the rope back, then didn't. She let it sit in his hand a breath longer, enough for the choke to show clean. Outside, the panther lay long, chin on sand, ears twitching with wind. It scented the air, unafraid. Whoever trained it had done so with trust, not blows. Carter put the rope back in his pocket, beside the hair and the thread, the pocket full, whispering faint as coins counted by touch. A stone ticked down like a pinprick. Carter looked up. At the gulch mouth, 3 shapes slid to the sand without sound. Wade first. Run the drill in their heads many times. Wade didn't smile, didn't flare, just looked tired. His eyes passed over the pen, the calves, the chain on the sand, stopping at Carter's hand. You hand her and the cat over, his voice lowered, dry as sun-cured hide. Then read the paper in town. Curtain falls. His right hand stayed off the gun. His left stripped a glove, rolled its edge. From his hip, a scrap of rawhide braid leaned wrong. Carter looked at it one beat, then looked into his eyes. The gunman didn't speak. One rolled his wrist till it cracked, dropped his finger to the trigger. The other shifted stance, toes set to spring. Lila didn't step back. She turned just enough to put part of herself between Carter and Wade, her eyes fixed on Wade. The panther raised its head, shoulders rising, back arched to half a crescent. Its yellow eyes hooked into the man in the chip-teal boots, unblinking. Its tongue licked the rim of its teeth once, wet. Lila clicked her tongue, light. It stopped, sank its weight. An invisible wire ran between its eyes and the gun barrel. Carter felt it hum behind his sternum. No wind moved. The sand felt heavier. Carter ran the math in his head. Bullet lines, cover, distance. If he went for the Winchester, half a beat to clear the safety. If he took the knife, this range would only bait a bullet. Draw now and lose. Don't draw and lose, only the order changes. He looked into Wade's eyes. There was no fire, only a worn groove. And under the wear, a decision signed by someone else's hand. Not a choice, Wade said, as if tightening a belt strap. Only one way left. He lifted his chin toward the cat. That goes first, she follows. You, sign the paper, still have dirt to be buried in. The gunman spread a half-step wider. Heels set where the sand's edge was firm. Lila drew a breath, her shoulders rising and falling like a skiff over a low swell. She gave no order. Her palm rested on the chain as if on a house dog's head. A fly landed on Wade's cheek, walked across his cheekbone, lifted. He didn't brush it off. He looked at Carter, neither asking nor warning, just waiting. Carter's heartbeat jumped into his throat, stuck, sank again. He brought his right hand clear of his body, opened it empty. Lila glanced quick, enough to catch the vein rise under his skin. The panther drew a thin breath through its nose, sound like a taut wire humming. The metallic scent in the creep down his spine. In his mind, the nut, the black hairs, the oil smell, the old horseshoe, the heel chip, lined into the only road. Hold or let go. Hold, blood here. Let go, lose what he would not name. His left hand slid down slow to the pocket, not the gun's place, but where he'd kept the small things weighing him since morning. His fingers touched the off-center knotted twine. Its roughness under skin was enough to tell him his hand was steady. Lila's hand stayed on the chain. Her nails paled. Her lips parted to a thin crack, not to speak, to breathe. The panther coiled tighter, like a spring given its last half-turn. Overhead, a cloud slid across, dimming the sand in one beat. Everything cooled a notch. Wade tilted his head a fraction, took the shade. Now, one gunman murmured, low enough for his mate alone. Carter didn't move. He kept still until stillness itself was a move. When that weight was as heavy as a shot, from the gulch mouth came the sound of a stone falling, louder than a pin's drop. Its echo rolled into the sand. 3 gun barrels flicked eyes toward it. Lila clicked her tongue, not like before, but pitched half lower. The panther flattened its head, tail straight, like a laid whip. Carter leaned the width of a hair, opening the lane for the choice to reach him. No one spoke. No one eased off. The sand held its breath, waiting for something to break it. The stone fell again, heavier, right as their eyes were away. Carter didn't run. He only reached across the saddle, pulled the Winchester from its scabbard, rolled his wrist to turn the barrel sideways, and threw. The rifle drew a black arc across the light, the stock turning once before it dropped into Lila's hands. Sand spat up. The 2 hired guns checked half a beat, then raised again. Wade's eyes locked, jaw set, left hand still working the glove's edge. Lila didn't fire. She whistled low, flatter than any note before, like a flat strap sliding over rock. The panther's head sank, its body turned, pads sliding, the chain tracing a thin black line over sand. It slipped into the canyon, cut like oil into a crack, leaving no breath behind. Only the faint tick of links over stone, smaller, smaller, as if someone pinched the sound down. Wind rushed into the gap it left, flattening the sand smooth, as if no muscle. Chain's loose length in her hand. Drew it a yard, letting the end rasp her knuckles red. She looked at the mark, not at anyone. The decision just made showed itself as a thin welt and a dusting of steel on her wrist. Lockwood stepped out from behind the rock wall, his shadow thrown crosswise, hat brim cutting his eyes. No panther in sight now. He stood straight, squinting once before his face went dark as weather closing. His right hand drew his revolver without show, barrel settling on Wade. "A body's better than nothing to explain," he said, level as reading a bill. The muzzle stopped at his brother's sternum, close enough for gun oil to mix with skin sweat. Wade backed a half-step, the chipped heel sinking with a rasp. His eyes stayed on Carter. No ask, just nailing something invisible into the man's face. One of Lockwood's gunmen turned his flank, setting a cross line. The other kept his barrel's path through Carter's shoulder to Lila. A killing lane if anyone slipped. Carter held his gaze, unmoving. He saw Wade's throat knot lift and drop. Wade's hand started to free itself of the glove, heat or rope end. He didn't know. Lockwood edged the barrel just enough to say, he could edit any affidavit in red at will. He tilted his head, glanced across the sand, and back to lock on Wade. Clean story, he said. Animal attack. I got here late. Unfortunate. Carter set his middle finger on the dagger's ridge, skin meeting steel, felt the fine crack in the blade like a hair caught there. Let it remind him. Iron breaks if bent wrong. He breathed out, slow. His eyes left the muzzle, went to the leather tube in Lockwood's pocket. The warrant. The hide smooth, its mouth frayed from much use. A man who carried his own law. A man who always had a body to fit the page. Lila stood half at his side, hand on her bag strap, thumb brushing the rim to clear sand, as if it were the only task that mattered, the red mark from the chain still on her wrist. She dropped her eyes for a second, enough for Carter to see lashes touch shadow. Wade swallowed again, his stare locked as if to ask, "From here, what do you choose?" Hoofbeats echoed from far off, running on rock, breaking in the air like stoneware cups struck together. Fast. Many. Lockwood turned his head slightly. His two gunmen didn't. They only dropped their weight, muzzles angled toward the narrow run where the sound came loudest. Dust pushed over the rim like the breath of a canyon mouth. Lila stepped back half a pace until her shoulder brushed the edge of Carter's coat, into the shape of a makeshift shield. Lockwood lifted his left hand halfway, signaling the two gunmen to hold. He didn't lower the pistol at Wade's chest. The black barrel stayed like a pen, waiting for ink. No one spoke. The hoofbeats quickened, closer, until each strike sounded apart, no longer joined. Horse muzzle, then chest, then rider. Shadow spread across the sand. The narrow way filled. Wade braced his shoulders a fraction, as if to square his stance. Sweat ran down his cheek, dragging a darker stripe of dust. He didn't blink. Carter saw his brother's brows pinch, cutting a fine crease like the test line on wood before the saw. Lila kept her breath even, shoulders rising and falling to time. Her grip on the bag didn't ease. The riders came through. 3 neighboring ranchers, work coats faded, faces weathered. Behind them a deputy, badge bright under dust. They stopped in a not perfect line, enough to make a wall. Dust lay thin on hats and shoulders, then dropped off in submission. No shots skyward. Guns low, ready, eyes straight. The air thickened. The stillness in the sand changed color. Carter heard the collective breath like water drawn through a crack. Lockwood smiled, half-lipped as if adding a stroke to a letter. He still hadn't lowered the gun. The deputy's eyes swept the scene. Chain on the sand, makeshift pen, trough, calves. He didn't ask, "What happened?" He only tipped his chin toward the pistol in Lockwood's hand. One rancher, Harrow, nodded at Carter. The nod of a man who'd counted all the posts still standing. His gaze passed to Wade, slid to Lila, then back to Lockwood. His hand rested on his rifle's neck, thumb running over the rough notch worn by years. The rancher to his left spat into the dirt, silent. The deputy extended a hand as if offering Lockwood an invisible sheet to sign. That was all. Lockwood's smile thinned, his lids lowered, then rose. He moved the pistol off Wade's chest by half an inch, enough for a future telling to say it was no threat. But the muzzle still pointed, center mass. One of his gunmen glanced toward the deputy, eyes flicking before returning to post. The other adjusted his line to keep muzzles from crossing the newcomers. Practiced. The calves shifted in the pen. One stamped the sand like a single raindrop on tin. Lila loosened her grip, just curses. Done as neatly as changing a hinge. Lockwood stepped back half a pace, mouth still holding a smile's line, but the corners wrinkled. He said something short about a misunderstanding, holstered with an extra beat of politeness, lifted his hand clear to leave no mark. The deputy didn't look at him. He turned to Carter. No questions, just a small nod. He'd seen it all. His hand drew a circle in the air over chain, pen, calves, like a clerk writing minutes without paper. Lila bent, picked up the chain's end, still crusted with dried blood. Dark brown now, at a few links, specks of rust clung like red sand. She wound it into 3 small loops, no link hanging. The hook at the end was worn on one side from years on rock. Her thumb pressed it flat into place, a hand's habit. She dropped it in her bag. Metal hit the bottom with a low, heavy note, like the lid of a small chest closing. Carter didn't speak. He stood straight, hand closed. His eyes paused at the welt on her wrist, then moved on. She avoided his gaze, cinched the bag, tied an off-center knot. The back smoothed flat under her thumb. Same style. Same hand. She rose, sand dusting off her knees in 2 thin lines. Wade looked up, met his brother's eyes for a blink. No apology. No defense. Only the faintest nod of a man who'd miscut a plank and must accept trimming it short. Harrow tugged the rope. Wade stepped, sand sinking evenly. The hirelings were pushed to the rock, faces set, but lips blanched. Wind moved across the sand, lifting the smallest grains before letting them drop, blurring the mesh of footprints. The pen creaked, as if remembering it was just dead wood. The calves pressed together, one nosing another's neck. The trough tilted. The last drop fell. Tick. The deputy set his hand on the rail, thumb tapping once. Done. Lockwood turned, straightened his collar, brushed dust from his shoulder like chalk. 3 steps on, he glanced back once, not at a face, but at the space between Carter and Lila. The kind of space where an unfinished thing stands. He walked on. The narrow cut took him the way it takes anyone who doesn't look up at the sky first. Lila pulled the drawstring of the bag 1 inch higher. She shifted into the shadow of the cliff wall, stood still. Carter's eyes followed the rope around her wrist. 2 loops, 1 knot. Very easy to tighten if pulled hard. Very hard to open without knowing exactly where to press. He set his hand on the stall's. Sand's surface was smooth, as if someone had stroked it flat. And in the middle of that smoothness, a thin strand of jute stuck out half an inch from the sand, its knothead tilted, its back polished. Lila saw it. Carter saw it. Neither bent to pick it up. This was not the time to add another knot to the bag. They left it lying there like a seed, still warm, waiting to be touched only once it was cold. Night fell like a wet buffalo hide, heavy with the smell of salt. Carter reached the yard when the wire fence was already gray in shadow, the posts sunk into the earth like cracked fingers still trying to grip. The horse breathed thin smoke. The saddle deflated with an old sound. He tied the horse to the post, not tight. Tonight wouldn't hold anyone. At the house door, a broken chain hung on the hook. The hook bent outward as if pulled in one clean, decisive motion. The break in the chain link showed bright metal, the edge flattened, not torn, twisted, not cut. Carter touched the cold surface with his fingertip, fresh iron smell clinging to the skin. He lifted the chain, hearing the heavy, muted clank of iron links rubbing, a sound like the hoarse laugh of someone far away. At the hook's base, a dent the size of a fingernail, smooth as if someone had tested it many times before breaking it for real. The coin he'd wedged in the door crack that morning lay on the ground, its edge marked by a fresh scratch. It lay face up, the head's profile to the sky, with a thin streak of mud drawn across it, not dropped by the wind. A hand had passed, pressing the right spot. Carter bent to pick it up, the rim catching lightly against his palm's cushion. He didn't pocket it. He set it on the step, letting it look at him like a small, unblinking eye. Under lantern light, the ground kept words without letters. Fresh human tracks, heels narrow, toes turned slightly inward, steps even, each half a pace longer than most women. Someone who knew how to save strength. Beside them, the pad marks of a large cat, 4 round toes, claws retracted, tail dragging behind in a faint streak. 2 paths side by side, not crossing, not overstepping. No one pulling, no one being pulled, leaving together without looking back. The trail cut across the yard, curved past the barn's corner, touched the edge of the fence that had been cut before, then faded toward the property line where the short grass bent its heads as if smoothed by a hand. Carter followed for a few dozen steps. Each step, the mud released a muffled sound, like a throat swallowing cold water. At the boundary, the wire was tied temporarily with a single strand of jute, the square knot tilted, the back polished by a thumbnail's rub. Same style. Breath, and holding it halfway. Carter looked up at the roof. A thin sheet of tin quivered in the cold night, making a sound as faint as a needle touching a pot's side. The cattle in the field no longer huddled. They spread out, heads down, chewing slow. From the barn came the warm smell of hay, like the breath of someone sleeping shallow. The chain still hung there, the hook head bent at a fixed angle. Carter unhooked it, coiled 3 loops, and set it on the step. Each loop weighed another thought he didn't name. At the step's edge, a fine line of sand ran across, like the trace of a tail brushing lightly. A cat had passed here tonight. A cat not from this house. He spread his hand before his eyes, the day's thin scratches lying quiet, not bleeding. Only one spot stung, where his middle finger had touched the metal's edge. The sting was enough to remind a man he could still feel. He didn't go inside right away. He stood and listened to the night. Fence creaked half a beat, then stilled. Horse bit the bit once, then stopped. A cricket sang needle straight at the porch's foot. The night brought nothing more. It only kept what he had brought back. A bent hook, a broken chain, 2 parallel tracks heading for the line. Inside, the dark was thicker than the smell of old coffee. Carter lit the lamp, the flame drawing to the wick's heart, flaring small, showing the table piece by piece. On the table lay a sheet of paper folded in half, its edges uneven, ink smudged at the corner, as if touched by a wet hand. He didn't open it right away. He looked at the fold. At the crease, the paper was thicker, like the kind stamped with a seal. He slid a fingernail gently along the edge. The paper came apart with a small sound, dislodging a grain of dust. The back revealed a red seal that had once sat at the edge of a hunting license. Its break matched exactly the time he had folded that sheet. A small, serrated tooth offset. Carter turned it over. The words, "The debt between us is settled. Don't look." Ink uneven. The hand tilted slightly left, the period larger than normal. A press with more force than needed. In the top left, a stroke of ink dragged into a tail, because someone had set a finger there before it dried. That finger had trembled for a moment. The writer wasn't good at writing with a shaking hand. The paper's lower half smelled of damp, the ink still fresh. Carter knew where this sheet had come from. The drawer under the sink, the dampest spot in the house. A hand had opened the drawer, taken the license, torn it in half, written on the back, placed it on the table. The intrusion was caught fresh hand marks on the tabletop, a faint circle, as if someone had set a fist down to hold the paper steady while writing, the marks dragging faintly toward the edge. Carter took the paper into his palm as if holding something hot, then folded it along the same crease, walked to the drawer. The drawer was still the old dark wood, the brass pull cold. He slid it open. Inside were a stack of receipts, a few seed packets, a paring knife with a chipped blade. In the center, a space exactly the width of the paper. He set it in. Edge met edge. Flush. His eyes stopped at the words once more before the drawer closed. The debt between us is done. Out here, debt was not just money. It was a calf returned to its herd, a life not tied to the mouth of a gun, a chain not pulled to the neck at the wrong time. He felt his throat tighten for a beat, like when the tongue brushed against an edge of steel. No one was here to see him swallow. On the edge of the table lay a tiny bristle, black, its back flat. Someone had tied the paper before placing it down, or had tied themselves before leaving. Someone who used their hands to knot their certainty shut. Carter touched the bristle with a fingertip, then let it be. He didn't take it all into the drawer. Part of it had to stay outside, like a tack pinning a calendar page to the wall, reminding a man that today had been turned. He sat down. The wood creaked like it remembered someone. On the wall, the Winchester was no longer where he'd hung it that morning. He remembered throwing it to her in the canyon. Now its place was a blank patch of wall. That blank sat beside the words in his chest like a piece that fit. The barn cat came out, leapt onto the chair opposite, hunched, eyes on him, ears turning a small circle before stilling. It didn't make a sound. It only tucked its tail, leaving the round print of the tail tip in the table's dust. Carter opened the drawer again, like a man checking a precious thing he'd just put away. He touched the edge of the paper with a fingertip. No give. He closed the drawer slowly, so the sound of wood meeting wood wouldn't break anything. In this house, even a small sound was a decision. Outside, wind slid through the loft vent in the barn wall, pulling a long hiss. That sound was thin, strung out, its head sharp as a pin scratching tin, then sinking like a knife drawn from a sheath. The barn door still bore 3 pale claw marks. In the yellow light, they looked like 3 cracks on the back of a sleeping animal. Old wounds turned to new hide, but still reminders that claws had once been there. Carter stepped onto the stoop, standing in the pool of light from a bulb half blinded by insects. On the ground, the parallel footprints had blurred halfway under the wind, the rest still pointed lightly. The hiss strung into his ear like a call from a place he once knew the way to, once waded through, once stood inside without looking around. The wind in the barn carried the smell of dry grass, wood bitten by winter, sleeping horses. No blood, no fear. The cattle didn't lift their heads. An old one flicked its ear, the sound thin as wool brushing a coat. Carter set his palm on the door where the 3 claw marks were. Skin to wood. The wood was cold. The splinters bit into the soft flesh between the heel of his hand and the base of his thumb. He left it there a second longer, then lifted it away. On the inside of the latch hung a single red-brown hair, fine, caught in the iron seam. He looked, but didn't take it. It swayed in the wind just enough to show it had been warm a few hours before. That hair was a sentence already spoken. In the yard, the clothesline sagged, one end tied with an off-square knot, the back of it polished smooth. Its shadow fell on the wall as the lamp swayed, lengthening when the wind rose, shortening when it stilled. Each change told Carter the one who tied it had never learned to tie straight. And he knew that crooked held fast in its own way. He left it there unloosed, unstraightened. He turned. In the house, the lamp still burned, a streak of yellow slipping through the door crack like a thread drawn toward where he stood. He snuffed the unlit end of a cigarette against the porch post, a habit without purpose. Then stepped back from the barn. 1 step, 2, 3. The door stayed ajar, the hiss through the vent lengthening as if to pull him back. He didn't go. His foot turned, the sand under his boot breaking with a small sound. At the cut in the fence, the 2 sets of tracks were gone, wind having gathered them into the rest of the ground. On the step, the chain lay coiled 3 loops, like a heavy knee under a blanket. Carter lifted it, hung it back on the bent hook. The hook had no longer pointed true. It bent a new way now, and would stay that way a long time. He brushed the lamp flame down so it burned lower. The light drew back, letting the night step in apace. Far off, a coyote called once, off-beat, then stilled. The sky hung a band of stars as if someone had scattered salt. Carter leaned against the porch post, his eyes on nothing in particular. In his chest, a space just wide enough for air to pass without scraping. He heard the hinges hiss again, knowing it wasn't a call. It was the sound of something once pushed the wrong way, now back on its track, but carrying a new curve. Out here, such things lasted a long time, longer than a season's grass, longer than the smell of ink on a folded sheet. And most times, no one needed. The crooked square knot on the fence rope still held. The human tracks that had once run alongside the cat's were gone to the wind, but the scuffed heel print stayed wedged in memory like a snapped nail. Betrayal had its own shape, sometimes an off knot that held in the way it wanted. Justice, too, sometimes standing with the knife, sometimes with the hand that put it away. Carter chose to let the cat live. Lila chose to leave the chain. Wade chose to bow for the binding. Lockwood chose a story easy to tell. Each had their reason and their price. Out here, right and wrong could be a breath apart. The question left was, if set before you a bent door hook, a heavy chain, and a paper blurred with ink, what would you keep, and what would you let the wind carry away?